my name is Nona Jiha. Let's start with what is taxation. A tax is a compulsory financial charge or some other type of levy imposed on a taxpayer by a governmental organization in order to fund government spending and various public expenditure. Revenues from taxation used to purchase input necessary to produce government supply goods and services or to redistribute purchasing power among citizens. Tax effect the decision to buy and sell product and input by changing their price. For example, many motorists line up at the petrol station to fill up their tank before a new fuel tax increase goes into effect. Okay, next, what is user charge? User charge or user fees is a official payment charged by the providers to the patient at the point of delivery. From the economic point of view, they can simply be seen as consumer price. The term of user charge is mainly but not exclusively used in tax finance system. The economic effect of this form of cost sharing are very similar to those of user charge because they can also be interpreted as consumer price.
Next, I will proceed with the different taxes and user charges. The first difference on tax is tax can cause a loss in efficiency in private use of income and resources. Next, prices that are distorted by tax are not longer simultaneously reflect the marginal social costs and benefits of goods and services. Lastly, tax provide revenue to finance government. Next, I will proceed with the differences in user charges. The first difference is price is determined by the political rather than the market interaction. Next, user charges are designed to finance specific government. And lastly, user charges are direct price associated with consumption of particular goods and service. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Annalisa Amira Atika. Now, I will continue with the effects of budget deficit financed by government borrowing towards an economy. Before that, I would like to briefly explain what is government borrowing. Government borrows through the issue of government securities. Borrowing is a loan taken by the government and falls under capital receipt in the budget document. It is essentially the total amount of money that the central government borrows to fund its spending on public services and benefits. Now, let's proceed with the effects. Firstly, can keep the market rate of interest. Under Ricardian equivalent, the increase in government borrowing to finance the deficit is exactly offset by an increase in annual private savings to pay the taxes necessary in the future to retire the debt. As a result, the interest rate does not increase above its initial level. For further understanding, let's have a look at this graph. It shows that the increase in government borrowing to cover the deficit increases the demand for loanable funds. However, as a direct result of this borrowing, the supply of savings increases from S to S prime to provide funds for higher taxes anticipated in the future. The increase in the supply of loanable funds results in a new equilibrium at point E. At that point, an additional dollars of loanable funds are made available per year for financing future taxes resulting from the deficit. The equilibrium amount of loanable funds is now at L3 per year. If these extra funds exactly equal the amount of funds required to finance the deficit, the interest rate under the equilibrium is at I1, the initial level. Furthermore, increase in national debt is also one of the effects of budget deficit financed by government borrowing. When a government borrows money, its debt increases. According to the Ministry of Finance Fiscal Policy Review 2021, the national debt had already expanded to 60.7% of GDP as at the end of September 2020 from 52.5% of GDP in 2019. Let's have a look at this bar graph. It shows the national debt of Malaysia from 2016 to 2019 with projection up until 2026. As we can see, the national debt keeps on increasing year by year, resulting from the increasing government borrowing.
Hi, my name is Aina Atika. I will proceed with the next part of the question, which is explain the effects of deficit budget financed by government borrowing towards an economy. Okay, first let's know the definition of budget deficit. Budget deficit refers to the excess of government expenditures over revenues raised by tax, fees and charges levied by the government authorities. In other words, it is when a government spending more than the revenues that managed to obtain in a given year. Okay, in this case, the government expenditures refer to the all money spent by the government on the acquisition of goods and provision of service for the use of the public or people in the country. There are two types of government expenditures, which are operating and development expenditures. The example of operating expenditures are paying pensions for public servants and judges' salary. Meanwhile, the development expenditures are including building road, hospital and police station. As for government revenues, it refers to the money earned by the government from taxes and non-taxes sources to finance the government expenditures. Government revenues from taxes are divided into two, which are direct taxes and indirect taxes. Direct taxes are including income tax, corporate income tax, estate duty and miscellaneous tax. Indirect tax, on the other hand, are sales tax, service tax, export duties, import duties and miscellaneous tax. Meanwhile, the non-taxes are including license, registration fees and permits, service fees, interest and proceeds from investment, fines and penalties, income from exploitation of oil and gas. Okay, let's take a look on this bar chart. This bar chart illustrated the budget balance in 2016 to 2026 in relation to gross domestic product (GDP) for Malaysia. The negative value shows a budget deficit. Meanwhile, the positive value shows a budget surplus. As we can see on this bar chart, Malaysia faced a fluctuation of budget deficit since 2016. In 2019, Malaysia experienced a budget deficit of 2.23% and it was expected to be increased to 5.5% in year 2020. Malaysia Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Aziz said during a webinar on June 9, 2020, hosted by Maybank Investment Bank Research, the Economic Recovery Plan, which is Penjana, will bring the budget deficit up to 5.8% to 6% of the gross domestic product (GDP) in year 2020. Thus, in this case, mostly the government will use the government borrowings as a method to finance the budget deficit.
Hi, my name is Aina Sohaila and I will explain about to what extent are the effect different as compared to surplus budget. The effect of budget deficit. By 2019, deficit budget had grown to more than 10% of GDP. It seemed to give a little chance for federal government to balance back their budget anytime soon. Budget deficit can keep the tax lower and we can still enjoy a given quantity and mix government service. But it also can allow higher government spending for usage of transfer or purchase goods and service without raising a tax. By this also, it will postpone the burden of taxation for the future generation. What is budget surplus? A budget surplus is occur when income exceeds the expenditure. This term is often referred to the government financial state. A surplus is an indication that a government finance are being effectively managed. A budget surplus might be used to make a purchase, pay off back debts, or save for the future. A federal government with a budget surplus may use the money to make an improvement, such as revitalizing a decaying park or downtown area. The effect of budget surplus. When the government is in the budget surplus, the government no need to enter the credit market as a borrower anymore. The market demand for credit is equal to the private demand for credit. It also can affect the supply of loanable fund. As shown in the figure, when the budget is balanced, there will be neither surplus or deficit. The demand for credit is equal to D curve, which is we call as demand, and demand is equal to the private demand for credit. Market equilibrium interest is I1. When the government runs a surplus and use it to retire the existing debt, the supply of credit will increase from S1 to S prime. S prime is equal to S prime plus different L, and different L is the amount of government debt that is retired. The retiring debt will make the bonds change to the cash and increase the supply loanable funds. Increasing the supply loanable fund make the market equilibrium interest rate decline from I1 to I2, and this make the interest rate is lower. By that, it will increase the quantity of loanable fund demand for investment and other private borrowing, which is from L1 to L2. The surplus is used as a source of public finance. It allows tax to be reduced and the effects are likely to be different. If the surplus is used for tax reduction, then it supplies funds to consumer as well as investor. If households decide to use the extra funds they receive from tax cut for consumption instead of saving, there will be no increase in the supply of loanable funds and no decline in the real interest rate. Saving and investment is contribute to the economic growth, so that many economists and politicians are more like surplus to be used for retired the debt.